Let me start out by telling you that Reverend Mike and I went to a Phillies game last night. They started out really strong, and we were, I can get into it. I can yell like anybody else, maybe even louder sometimes. It was very fun, and I love to do that. But in the middle of it, when we started out strong, and then, those people from Florida, they really were catching up and making some good moves and all. And my minister brain suddenly went, wait a minute, aren't we about creating a world that works for all? Don't we want everybody to be happy? Don't we want everyone to win? Well, there are times that you just got to get into the game, right? But let's keep in mind it is a game, right? And your share was beautiful. Thank you so much, because we're all about looking to see what can I do to make a difference, because this month is about protecting the vulnerable. It's a theme from Centers for Spiritual Living. And the value for the month is empowerment. And I love how the kids responded today when I was talking about the wee wisdom and how you can make a difference. And little Mila says, I just go and sit with people at lunchtime that don't have anyone to sit with. You get it early on, and it can make a difference in your life, in your neighborhood, and ultimately in the world. So we want to start envisioning things in a larger way than we have before, because the co-creative power, the creative juices that are ours to use are always available, and we're always using them. How are we using them? I love what George Bernard Shaw said, many, but this one in particular. He said, you see things and you say, why? But I dream things that never were, and I say, why not? I say, why not? That's the expanded consciousness we're looking for. So, of course, we don't expect to change external conditions that don't seem favorable to us by focusing on them and talking about them and complaining about them and spending our lives with our knickers in a knot over them. Because it's not going to make it better. What's it going to make it? Worse. Say it with me. Worse. We want to make it better. So we can change the focus of our attention and ask ourselves the question, instead of who's going to do something about this, what is mine to do? And do you know, it always begins with me. Yeah, I'm the one. As soon as I change my consciousness, everything's going to be better. No, we are all the one. But I can only begin with me, can't I? Because when I begin to take a different view, a higher view, when I take a higher watch and maintain it and see the possibilities that are there, something happens. There's a shift in my consciousness, and people feel it all around, don't they? Have you noticed that when you shift your attitude from ain't it awful to let's see what's possible, that other people want to play in that arena? They want to play with you. It's only natural. Each of us is a beautiful spiritual being, and we're having a wonderful human experience, but let's bring it all together in such a way that we're making our own lives more wonderful and we're making a difference with others. So it's really wise to seek information, right? What's one of our main principles here? Seek first to understand. Let's not jump to conclusions. Let's not make things up about someone else. Let's seek first to understand. Help me understand that point of view. Help me understand how you came to that conclusion. Help me understand why that's meaningful to you. Help me understand why that's upsetting to you. Help me understand. What a difference it makes. And then we ask, what is mine to do? Well, I have one of these speeches as well to mention to you, and this was Robert Kennedy. There's only one mind, I hear. Because idealism is not incompatible with practicality. And so the perspective that RFK gave at the University of Cape Town, South Africa, in 1966 applies to innovators and visionaries all the time, including today. He said, idealism, high aspirations, and deep convictions are not incompatible with the most practical and efficient programs. We begin with the ideal. Plato spoke about the ideal, the doctrine of the forms. This is pure beauty. And then we get down to the world where there are roses which partake of the form of beauty, right? But they are copies. They are not nearly what this whole ideal of beauty is about. Peace, love, all of the ideals, they are that, and then we bring them down into the earth. We are constantly, when we are consciously co-creating, bringing heaven to earth. We have a couple of ministers in our movement who are doing some marvelous international work, beginning with the ideal. How can this become a world that works for all? Dr. Keith Cox and Dr. David Alt. And I know there are more, but these are building schools in foreign lands to serve, to educate, to motivate young people, especially girls, to dream a bigger dream and to attain a larger life. Therefore, those students who are attending right now, and for those who are to follow, David Alt's Kaleidoscope Child Foundation is so big now, so magnificent, that he actually left his church in Atlanta in order to do the work that he is doing for the children. His mission is to advance vulnerable children and communities worldwide with sustainable education, life skills, and fresh water. Oh, the things we take for granted, huh? And he has schools in Cambodia, in Guatemala, in India, and guess what? In the United States, there is a population everywhere that needs to be served. We need to wake up to that and realize there is something we can do about it. Dr. Keith Cox, for years, has had the Malawi Project with over 20 schools built in Africa. We can think bigger. We can realize that there is something beyond what we're already doing that actually can be done. Now, how about locally? Well, you know, Reverend Mike and I belong to the ministerium, and we know about T&E and the food banks and the diversity training, and our ministerium is all about coming together for good, for each other, for our communities, and for this community. Chester County has a wonderful program called Decade to Doorways. And they, not long ago, were celebrating their local heroes who have been part of working to end homelessness in Chester County. Did you know there is homelessness in Chester County? Since its inception in 2012, Chester County has served more than 6,200 clients, of which 1,300 were children. And nearly 225,000 nights of emergency shelter were made available to the most vulnerable, and 1,451 people actually found permanent housing. There's good work going on. And they're working together to prevent homelessness in the first place. Now that is a great idea, isn't it? That's the way our principles would have us think as well. Let's take care of, let's do what we can to help what's going on out here, but let's change the whole consciousness so that we're preventing it. And it is happening. Just the other day, I heard a marvelous program on NPR on This American Life. You like This American Life, Ira Glass? It was about libraries. And this particular story was so poignant. It was a woman who, as a child, had spent so much time in libraries. So did I. Growing up in Los Angeles from age 0 to 9 3/4, there was a library right across the way from us, and I was there all the time. Did you used to love being in libraries? Do you still? Yeah, there's a whole world there. Well, this woman had visited a lot of libraries and spent a lot of time there with her 6 sisters when she was the youngest of the 6. And they had a baby brother, too. And when they moved from one state to another state, they could no longer afford rent. And so they would stay with relatives and friends and spend a lot of time in the library. And there was one whole year where they lived in a relative or friend's basement. And she said she remembered that there was an L-shaped sofa and then futons on the floor, and that she and all of her sisters slept there, and baby brother was with the parents. And they had a wonderful time. She said they were clothed, they were fed, they were loved, and their parents never let them know that it was anything but a great adventure. So it wasn't and there was a wonderful woman, Mrs. S., in the library that year that she visited all the time. And she was wonderful because the kids could all spread out. You know, a library is a children's space, isn't it? They could all run and find their own place and have some sense of privacy. You don't have that otherwise in a situation like that. And Mrs. S. was particularly wonderful to this young lady. Her name was Lydia, was the young girl. And she would bring her special books, and she would pay attention to her. And she never forgot this woman. So between her parents and Mrs. S., she never knew she was homeless until 2 decades later, when she was with a community group and they were discussing the homelessness and how many of the people who are homeless spend a lot of time in libraries. And suddenly the light bulb went on and she said, that was me. That was us. So there are other ways, in addition to providing places and food and encouragement and jobs and so forth, there are ways of simply realizing people belong with people. They deserve to be loved and nurtured and encouraged. And this young woman later on, years later, she went back to this community where they had lived for the year and tried to find Mrs. S. at the library. And they said, I think maybe there was somebody here years ago, Mrs. Stevenson, I think it was. So she tried to find her, and finally they gave her an email address, and she sent it to her. And oh my gosh, all of this, I love a parade. They all needed to go to the restroom at the same time. Thank you, Katie. That she sent an email and never got a response, telling her, just pouring her heart out to her about what a difference it made in her life. Never got a response. And then sometime later, she actually found, I think it was actually through NPR, through This American Life, that they found Mrs. Stevenson. And so they set up an appointment for her, and here came Lydia and Mrs. Stevenson got together. It was the most beautiful, touching reunion. No, she had never gotten the email. And, oh, yes, she remembered her well. And so this woman who had been a small child in the library had an opportunity to express her deep appreciation for how she made her feel. And the book that she gave to her was something, because she knew she had a lot of sisters, was something about 12 princesses or something. And the gift that Lydia brought to the librarian was this book, a brand new book. And Mrs. Stevenson said, that was my favorite book, which is why I wanted you to know about it. So I think on every level that we work, as we're connecting with others and doing our best to make this a world that works for everyone, the first thing is to bring our authentic spiritual selves to our humanity. to acknowledge that it's not about other, it's about our unity, it's about loving and respecting each other, and then perhaps seeing what else we can do to make a difference. A woman named Lauren Campbell is actually the administrator of this Chester County Decade to Doorways. She said the causes and situations of homelessness are vast and often deep-rooted, but in Chester County we recognize that homelessness does not define anyone. We truly believe that it is a temporary situation to which an end is achievable. It is a temporary situation to which an end and a solution is achievable. Let's think of challenges we have in our own lives and realize it is a temporary situation to which an end is achievable. In our communities, in our world, these are temporary situations. Let's not start giving power to something that we don't want to feed. Let's not give power to something that of itself has no power. It's temporary, and there is a solution. Just like the wonderful movie about marigolds, right? Everything will be all right in the end. If it is not yet all right, it is not yet the end. And we have something to say and do about the process. The most important thing is that we begin to visualize a very different scenario, a world of peace. And that can't happen until we really feel peaceful within ourselves and deal with those conflicting emotions that we have about our own lives, about our own families, about our own neighborhoods and workplaces. This is where it begins, of course. And we cannot feel constricted by the past. As Thomas Troward said, principle is not bound by precedent. We are dealing with a principle that says, as you sow, so shall you reap. As we think in our hearts, so are we. There is a beautiful law of cause and effect. And so that principle is here and now. It is real, it is eternal, and it is not bound by anything that has ever taken place in the past. And that's where we need to keep our attention. Isn't it wonderful we can do that? You're bigger than your history. God is bigger than the circumstance. A big idea. This is the big idea. I share this with you occasionally because it's such a big idea that we sometimes need to take it in bite-sized pieces, and ultimately we'll finally get it. The entire presence of the divine is fully present within each individual. Whoa, that's a big idea. Play with it a little bit. Mull it over a little bit. We are individualizing this divine mind. Every time we think, we are thinking with the mind of God that's here and ours to experience and to use for good. There's a powerful good in the world, in the universe, greater than you and I are, and it's here for us to use for good. All of it, right where you are. If there's to be peace and harmony in the world, where do you suppose it must begin? Everybody point to themselves. Right here, within. So that's when I get to ask, and you, if you wish, may do the same. How much chaos resides within me? From time to time, certainly not all the time. Are you willing, am I willing to invite the spiritual alchemy to change the vibration? It's all energy, right? If I become willing for the spiritual alchemy, that divine presence, to take the energy and lift it and transform it and bring me something beautiful and bring the world something more beautiful, then I'm doing my work. I'm using principle in the right way. So let's each one of us joyfully and willingly take responsibility to do our part. You and I have been created to be co-creators with the one infinite creator. Each of us is immersed in the creative process. It's working through us at all times. So let's do it together. Let's begin with us. Let's begin with us. Will you say with me, I am one with God and all beings. I exercise my divine authority to make dynamic changes in my consciousness. I use intelligent, creative imagination for good. Thank God it begins with me. And so, my beloveds, beginneth our lesson. Thank you.